Warm welcome to you, Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin. Very warm welcome to the ILO in this virtual space on financing for decent work, especially. I want to say that we know that this has started many years ago, but 2020 February, the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, appointed you as his special envoy on financing 2030 agenda for sustainable development. And we take this with two key points. First of all, Mr. Guterres is underscoring the importance, the fundamental importance of even stronger focus on ensuring adequate finance to realize the SDG agenda. Secondly, he is also underscoring your particular and very unique profile and unique set of expertise, of competences and experiences for exactly the financing issues. So you are not only a very accomplished and a very distinguished scholar. You are, of course, economist by training, but you also a doctorate of philosophy and economics. So you have enormous expertise and competence from that. You are then also, secondly, someone who has actually walked the talk, if I may say it like that, by being the Minister of Investment in Egypt for more than 6 years with an outstanding track record of results and impact on these issues. And then, of course, you have been the former Senior Vice President in the World Bank for the 2030 Agenda and the UN Relations and Partnerships. So with all of that, Mahmoud, I really want to say it's an honor and it's a privilege for us to have you with us. Thank you again for giving us your time. And we are now bringing you into a space that we have in ILO on, in particular, emphasizing more and more the financing of decent work. So this is a training and a capacity development course that we have developed on financing decent work. This is a joint effort with our enterprise department under the leadership of Vic van Vuren and with the International Training Center in Turin under the leadership of Yangu Liu and my own department on partnership and field support. This is a capacity development and training course that is focusing in particular to, or offered in particular to, our tripartite constituents, so our worker and our employers and Minister of Labor representatives. We would want to have this kind of capacity development to equip them even further to engage effectively on the elaboration of financing strategies, engage in the integrated national financing frameworks, and of course, play their role in general even more effectively to promote decent work outcomes, especially at country level. Now we have with us in this particular course more than 60 participants coming from very many regions: Asia, Africa, Arab states, and Europe. It is a pilot for us. We are doing it in English, but we are wanting to learn from this and have it in even more languages offered to our constituents. And I also want to emphasize that we are really, as a red thread through the capacity development course, using a South-South learning and sharing approach. And we consider this extremely important, that we can solicit the expertise of each country and bring that into what could be the future solutions. So again, your presence today, Mahmoud, is not only going to be an inspiration, but it's also going to be absolutely essential to give us insight to what are the, especially the overall UN approach to the financing of the 2030 agenda and how you could share your thoughts on that. So on behalf of the entire ILO, Mahmoud, thank you very much for being available and sharing your thoughts with us. I have in particular two issues I would want you to maybe focus on. And my first question would be, what would be your thoughts on the opportunities and also the challenges for mobilizing financing for the SDGs at country level, but maybe with a particular focus on the decent work agenda? Over to you, Mahmoud. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. What an introduction. Very generous of you to introduce me and the topic in this very nice, generous, and substantive way. Always good to have an opportunity to share ideas and to participate in ILO activities. I was very happy and pleased and got a great deal of knowledge and learning from participating in your events and activities, especially during the celebration of the 100th year, with the declaration that you put forward, the centenary declaration on the future of work, with the focus on humans, the human-centric approach of the ILO. In trying to answer your two important questions, I like to put that in the overall perspective of the Sustainable Development Goals globally, and how that going to be translated at the country level and in the areas of financing, as you mentioned. So even before COVID-19, many countries were very much off track as far as their ability to achieve the SDGs are concerned. And that's why the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, called for the Decade of Action back in 2019, calling for countries to take the remaining 10 years until the 2030 seriously, and to do more efforts in the implementation, mobilize better the resources, and to be guided better with information and evidence to guide the policy and the institutional work at the country level, either at the national level or at the subnational or local level. So the situation before COVID had a lot to be desired. And of course, COVID-19 came with its pressure on the systems, with high exposure of countries to their reality when it comes to growth, development, and capacity to deal with shocks. And it is very much important to deal with the impact of COVID within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, and not to make the efforts of emergency nature to be done at the expense of building back better or building forward better, depending on your situation. Some countries are happy to say we need to build back better because they were already on track of development and progress. But there are many other countries, they would say, well, back was not really that good. We don't need really to go back. So let's go in a different direction and build forward better. I know that colleagues at the ILO are saying, well, whatever you do, do it fast because of the cost on labor. And I've been reading your barometers, trying to identify the impact of COVID-19 on jobs, and the latest, this worrying figure of 495 million people losing their jobs because of COVID-19. And if we put into our consideration that 6 out of 10 jobs are in the informal sector, there will be multiples of this figure as well, suffering from job loss in the informal economy, especially in the developing countries and the low-income countries. So going back again to the issue, you have SDG 8, and I attended many events hosted by Mr. Guy Ryder on SDG 8 and how it's going to deal with it as a big connector with other goals as well. And this is the beauty of the Sustainable Development Goals, that even if you are trying to push one of the goals, be it SDG 8 on jobs and growth, or SDG 5 on gender. You need really to pay attention to other goals. But all would need finance. And even when we talk about decent jobs, what does that mean? It means employment, opportunities to be created. It needs right to work to be realized. It needs rights at work to be defended. It means social protection, which needs funding. And of course, it needs support by a social dialogue about priorities. All of that is basically about finance at the end. When it comes to how you are going to be realizing all of that, you need finance. And I think one of the main good things of the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Development Agenda, learning from the experience of the Millennium Development Goals, that it took finance very seriously. And I like what we did back in the day when we had the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals first, and then we thought about how to finance them a couple of years later in Monterey. This time was different because the Finance for Development conference was done in parallel with the preparation of the goals, and actually its meeting took place a few months earlier than the announcement of the SDGs. We had the announcement in Addis in 2015 in July, while the Sustainable Development Goals were announced in September 2015. So for the participant, the policymakers and decision makers participating in your important activity and program of knowledge sharing, Addis is a very important agenda of finance for development. There is a very important report that comes out from the UN system, the Interagency Task Force on Finance for Development. They produce this report annually. I encourage you to have a look at it. And actually, they are working in the new version for 2021 now, as we speak. To summarize it, in few seconds, the Finance for Development framework is about 4+3. The 4 areas are of finance: public finance, private finance, external finance, and domestic finance. So these are basically the different areas of finance that are handled in the Addis agenda. Public finance, including domestic resource mobilization; private finance through the role of the private sector and financial inclusion; external finance that comes in official form, like the official development assistance, or through FDI or portfolio investment or remittances. And there is the local contributions as well to that. So the Finance for Development agenda of Addis captured all aspects of finance: public, private, domestic, and external. In addition to that, it tackled 3 additional areas of work. One, on trade, and you know very well the impact of trade, the global value chain, and its impact on jobs and work opportunities. Debt management is another area of work, and we know now the impact of COVID-19 on debt and debt vulnerability. And there is very big question marks about capacities of countries to manage and honor debt obligations. Not just countries, but actually the private sector and some of the household sector as well have been exposed to higher debt than what they can afford of repaying. And then the final area on Addis that I'd like to emphasize in matters related to data technology as enablers of implementation of the SDGs. So always remember this, the 4+3, not to lose any of them. And it's always good to look at them together, not to take, of course, there are many people who are specialists in very specific area of work, but it's very much important to take them from a comprehensive perspective and to translate them from their global nature into your national nature. How is in your country, the Ministry of Finance and the private sector and those who are responsible for international cooperation and those who are responsible for investment and trade are working together in addition to the other matters I just mentioned. It's not just enough to talk and understand the global framework, which looks nice and neat, but basically how to translate it at the national level, which all of the actions and the challenges need to be considered. This is the case before COVID-19. And what comes with COVID, and we had a very important process led by the Secretary General and the Prime Ministers of Jamaica and Canada, started in May the 28th and just ended with another heads of state meeting on the 29th of September. It's about finance for development in the era of COVID-19 and beyond, because it's telling us that some of the scars and the negative impacts of COVID-19, unfortunately, are going to be with us even after we put the pandemic under control from a health perspective. But there will be an impact on the real economy. There will be an impact on jobs. And those who lost their jobs, the 495 million, are going to be, some of them are going to be returning fast. Some others need really more support at the national level for them to rejoin the labor market again. And there will be an impact on the financial sector, on that. So we need really to see how COVID-19 is changing the finance landscape. And that's why we had this process that lasted from May. Actually, there were like 6 weeks preparatory meetings as well, and engagements before the meetings in May. So that was a very long process of around 6 months until we reach better understanding of what we should be doing together as a global community. So this process is dealing with 3 areas: emergency response to COVID-19, restructuring and building forward better, and sustainability. And all need finance. Emergency finance for health sector and for the social protection, which is one of the areas that the ILO has great deal of ownership and contribution to our knowledge, understanding, and for the policy work on it. And especially that has the ILO this unique position as the custodian of good collaboration between governments, the business sector, the employers, and of course the workers and their trade unions. So the issue of emergency response, when you emphasize the human-centric approach, is very relevant here, because you are supporting people suffering because of health crisis, and you are supporting people through financial means, through social protection. Then the second area of work is related to inclusive growth and restructuring and building forward better. This is all about investing in areas that could really bring the sectors affected more by the crisis back into work. Of course, some of the sectors are more agile than others. Some of the sectors even did well during the crisis, like digital solutions, for instance, or some of the services related to health. But other sectors, like in the services industry, for instance, like hospitality or tourism, suffered a great deal, and travel. So what you need to do is, on finance, not just public, but public and private, is very important. And finally, we cannot do that without really taking the issues related to sustainability very seriously. And matters related to sustainability, investment in areas to deal with the challenges of climate change, either through mitigation or adaptation, investment in the environment at large. They provide opportunities. They are not waste, as some people are saying. They are really investing in a good way to create jobs while we are doing the function of protecting the health of the planet. Whenever we are doing, either on the emergency side or in the midterm or in the long term, we need really to take finance very seriously. And finance here is basically about all of what I talked about, public, private, domestic, and external. But we need as well to deal with debt and the illicit financial flows. Illicit financial flows are becoming very serious, and they are a leakage of the system, and it's a theft of people's money that needs to stop. And here there are lots of good work that the UN system had been pushing in order to have the finance follow the priorities of achieving the SDGs, having a better job in debt management under the concept of debt sustainability, and finally combating illicit financial flows. So I hope that I answered at least partially your two questions. They are too big, but I try to tackle them.
No, very much so, Mahmoud. Very clear and very inspiring. It's also very clear from how you're describing it that the challenges are significant, but that's exactly also how I hear your point, how the importance of being comprehensive and really approach these things in a more systemic and systematic manner. Thank you so much, Mahmoud. Yeah, I'm busy taking notes because this is all extremely precious and you are very clear in setting out the framework. So thank you so much. And I know I've probably taken too much of your time. So may I again, on behalf of the ILO, thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin. This has been extremely useful. Thank you. And really, it's an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Be safe. Thank you.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.